Our restoration on basket case continues coming up next. Well, good morning. Welcome back here to the shop. My name is Brett, and if you are brand new to the channel, well, once again, welcome. We are continuing on our restoration series on basket case here. This is our little GL Lines horse that came in from the Vermont, New Hampshire area, and we are and have been working on putting this little horse back together. We have the body pretty well glued back, and we are now ready to move on to reattaching these legs. Now, when we first got started, I was able to remove the front legs. They were pretty well fixed in place. So I'm not anticipating any real work to be done on those front legs. There's a few things here that we have to work on, but those for the most part are going to go back in pretty tight. The back legs are a different story here. So I've been again here looking at it this morning and trying to figure out the best direction to go with this. And what I am seeing here, the leg here on this side is not going to be too bad. Again, we have a pretty good sized gap here where this tenon goes in, and we have a lot of a gap where the top of the leg meets the body. And I'll see if I can get my camera in here so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Now, on this other side, this rear leg, again, really, really loose. There's not much there holding this at all. So we're probably gonna have to go in, and what I'm thinking is gluing on some thin pieces of poplar, letting those dry, gluing them in, letting them dry, and then we'll work on working those tenons back down and kind of reworking them a little bit so that they have a bit of a snug fit. But really what is really concerning to me is the gap that is back here where it meets the body. So this has about a ½ inch gap and it goes down to nothing. So we're going to have to add and make up some more wedges and glue those in place. And then, like I said, this is going to take quite a bit of time and some doing here to rework the tenon and get these legs so that they fit nice and tight. So we go to glue this back in, they're going to work or they're going to fit and hold well. So what I've been doing here this morning, again, I cut up when I did the wedges on the top side or on these middle body blocks, is I actually cut up some nice wedges here, and I'm just sanding these down so that I can make a nice size wedge that goes from about £1/4 inch to nothing. And I had one already started, so I'm just finishing sanding that right now. And what I'm thinking is right here on these two spots, especially this one right here, I think we can go in and just take one of these wedges with some glue and tap it down into place and let that dry, and that ought to fill pretty good, and that ought to really make this leg. Everything here on this back leg, since we've glued and added these center blocks, it's really, really tight. Even though we have a pretty significant crack here, it still is in, it's pretty solid. So I think just adding a wedge in here with some glue is going to be enough to hold this. Same thing right here. Now we have a piece missing out of here, but I think the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and put a wedge in here and let that dry. We'll cut it off, and then I plan to go back in here with my handheld router and with a dado bit on here. I think we can plow out with our router and square this up, and then we can add a piece of wood in there, a piece of poplar in there, and then we can work that down. On this side, we have another significant crack. Again, I think just a wedge, a poplar wedge with some glue tapped in place is going to be enough to glue that back into place, and the same here on the back. So that's where I'm at this morning. I'm going to finish sanding this, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll put these wedges in place, let those dry, and then we'll move on to the next step. Well, now that our wedges are in place, we'll just have to set this aside to dry, and we'll give this a few hours. You probably noticed that I grabbed this is a Japanese back saw, and I've had this for a number of years. This is one of the handiest tools, and if you don't have one, I'd recommend going and getting one. I think I picked this up at my local hardware store, Home Depot or Lowe's, something like that, a number of years ago. But I was able to go in there with my saw and just sort of open up those cracks. Some of them were a little bit tight, and doing that with the saw, I was able to kind of clean them up, straighten them up a little bit, and then put the wedge in place. So it makes for a really, again, nice tight glue joint. So we'll set this aside. Next up, I think we're going to focus our attention on these back legs here, and we'll see what we can do with those and start getting these fitted. So let's go ahead and take a look at the rear legs, because those are going to need the most work out of this entire project. And this is what I'm thinking at this point, and just kind of looking at these and studying it. I don't like that this tenon was clipped off. So I think one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up this edge right here, and I'm going to glue on another piece of wood that would make this tenon more square, and then we can sort of work that down. That's one of the first things. If you look at this one, it was squared at one time, and then I think at the factory they probably just took a chisel because it is broken, and I think they just broke it off. Now there is indication here that there was a nail that went through there. It could have broke it at some point and it might have fallen off, but I'd like to go ahead and make these tenons square again, and then we'll start working that. The other thing that I really want to work on here is adding material to the front and back part of the overall leg. And I showed you on the video earlier that we've got about a 1/4 inch gap, and it goes from a 1/4 inch to nothing. And just thinking about that and the best way again to approach this and how to correct that, I was going to make a wedge and go from a 1/4 inch to nothing and glue it in place. But now I'm wondering if I ought to just go ahead and glue in some 1/4 inch material on either side here, and then once that sets, the glue sets, we can go over to the bandsaw and I can tilt my table, and then maybe we can run it through. So I'm not 100% on that, but we're going to look at that. And again, I'm going to work that out. But I think right now, let's go ahead and let's clean up this edge, and let's go ahead and make these tenons square again. And I'll see what kind of poplar, what kind of material I've got laying around to do that. Looks like we need a piece that is, I'm going to say about just under 3/4. So I think we can work with that. I was just rooting around in my scrap bin and found this piece of poplar, so I think that'll work just fine. So I just ran it over to the planer and planed it down, so we are just about perfect. We may be just a little bit thick, but that's okay because that gives us room to sand it down. So let's go ahead and let's clean up both of those edges. And let's just use our orbital. I think we can get it fairly close there with that. Now, I'm trying to look, it looks like the grain, kind of like to line this up and have our grain running the same direction. It looks like it's running this way. I don't think for something like this it's really that critical, but we'll see what we can do here. I think we can work with that as long as this spring clamp will stay on. So let's just kind of carefully set that aside. And we'll do the second one. Well, that looks good. Now, like I said, this material is just a little bit thick, about 1/16 of an inch thick, so we've got plenty of sanding to do, plenty of material there that we can sand that, and that should work once this glue sets. Now, what I'm thinking next, what I want to do is I'm going to take some poplars, some material here, some of my scraps, and I want to glue on a piece right over top of this tenon, about 1/8 of an inch thick or so. That'll do two things. That's going to, of course, strengthen this piece that we're putting in there. Plus, that's going to take up the gap that we have when we fit this leg back in. We have about 1/8 of an inch or so that we want to take up, and I think that's going to be like one of the next steps. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But let's go ahead and let's set these aside and let that glue set up. And then we can come back, take the clamps off, and then we can kind of move on from there. But slow but sure, we're getting there. All right, moving right along with our little horse here. It's been long enough now that the glue's pretty well set on these wedges that we put in earlier. So let's go ahead and cut those off. And let's focus our attention on the rear of this horse, and we'll just keep, moving on and see what we can get done. I think the first place we're going to start is this area right here, right where we've got a big chunk taken out. And this is where I said earlier, I'm going to grab my cordless, my little handheld router, and we're going to put in a straight bit here. I believe this is a 5/8 straight bit, and we're just going to plow out a section here. Then we'll just glue in a piece of poplar, then we'll set that aside to dry. Now, as far as setting the depth, I'm just going to take about 1/2 inch or so. I'm just kind of guessing. There is really no, of course, set size or depth that we want to go for. I can see in here we're deeper than 1/2 inch, so we're just going to start with 1/2 inch and plow out a little bit of an area. Let me get a feel for this here. I think we can get it with that. And I think we can go a little bit deeper. Let me clean a little bit more of that edge up. That looks good. I think I'm going to go ahead and continue routering right on this side too. We're kind of split out here a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and grab my palm sander and sand this down flush, and then we'll just go ahead and router that out too. Then we can just kind of do it all at once. We certainly don't need to be going this deep, so let's set the depth. I think we're only going to go about 1/4 of an inch. Okay, ran over to the table saw and just cut a thin piece here. I think we can get that to fit, no problem. Just need to shave a little bit. Good. That went in perfect. Now let's go ahead and get a piece here. I plowed it out even though that was a 5/8 straight bit. I call it a dado or a rabbiting router bit. We're about 3/4 of an inch now. So let me run over to the table saw and I'll cut that. That ought to work. Nice, that makes a good repair right there. Now we'll just set that aside to dry and then we'll come back. This side doesn't look bad. I don't think we have to do much there. So what I want to do next is once our rear legs are pretty well set, those pieces we put on to finish off or square off our tenons, I want to glue on a couple of thin pieces right over top of that. We're going to make our tenons just a little bit thicker, and then once that's dry, then we can go in and maybe start shaving or sanding and get these tenons to fit in a lot tighter. So that's what I want to do now. So other than that, everything else looks pretty good. Everything is pretty tight, pretty strong. Good. Well, we'll see you here in just a little bit. Now, another area I see that we can address here while this glue's drying is we have a crack right here in the front. So let's go ahead and throw a wedge in that and get that glued so that also can be sitting and drying. I've got some scraps here that I think we can use that'll fit that. Now that piece looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and put that in place. That ought to work. Good. Now that is pretty well done, and we'll just set this all aside to dry, and we'll give that plenty of time. I want to give this a little while longer, these back legs, but in the meantime, let's go over to the table saw and let's grab a piece of poplar and let's rip a small piece of poplar to make, I'm going to call these mending plates, the little extensions, so we can build the thickness of these tenons up. And we can have that ready to go so that when we pull the clamps off, we can clamp those right up. Now I've already measured the tenon and we need 1.75 inches. So we'll cut that first. Then I just we're gonna slice a thin piece. And like I said, I think we'll go about 1/8 inch. That looks good. Now there's no point in running this all the way through. This is just a scrap piece of poplar anyways. We'll just take this to the miter saw, we'll cut that off, and we'll cut off what we need. There. We'll leave it long for now, and here in another hour or so we'll come in, we'll take the clamps off, and then we'll go ahead and get these glued in place, and then that part will be done. And then we'll just kind of see what else we can do on this little horse. Okay, well, while I was letting everything sit on the bench and dry, I decided to run and go get my hair cut. So got that done, and now we're back, and we can go ahead and take the clamps off. And I think the last thing I'm going to do here for the day is, since we already milled up our 1/8 inch piece, is go ahead and let's get these tenons prepped, and we can glue these pieces on, and then tomorrow we can come in and start fitting these back legs. That's going to be a big job. You know, we can start fitting these tenons and fitting these back legs properly. And I mean, we still have quite a bit of work to do on these yet, but you know, every little bit we're gaining on it. Let's just see how these look. So definitely, I think what we're going to do is we're going to glue these on this side of the leg, because we have, like I said before, we've got about 1/8 inch gap on the inside. So let's go ahead and we'll get these glued on before we leave for the evening. Well, now we'll just set these aside to dry. That's about all we can do right now. And tomorrow when we get into the shop, one of the first things I want to do is go ahead and get this surface flattened. So we'll sand these two repairs down and get this surface all prepped. And then I want to start working on fitting these tenons back into these mortises and see if we can get those to fit pretty, pretty snug. That's what we're shooting for. And then after that, we have to fill this gap because these rear legs were never fitting flush against the bottom body block. So I've got a couple of ideas on how we're going to do that. So, well, I don't just have to wait until tomorrow. We've got to let that dry. So yeah, that's good enough for today. Well, we'll see y'all tomorrow. Well, good morning. Today is a new day here at the shop, and I'm kind of setting a goal for myself here today. I'd really like to get all four legs reattached to the body of our little horse here, and that sounds like that shouldn't be that big of a problem, but there's quite a bit of work yet to do, just even on these rear legs, just to get these reattached. And I just say, well, let's just jump right into it here. I think the first thing I'm going to do is grab my sander, and I'm going to start working in leveling the rear part of this horse, and then we'll start figuring out and taking our time and working these tenons down to fit the mortises here. So let's just jump right into it. Well, that wasn't too bad to get those tenons to fit in those mortises, snugly. So what I was doing is just using my orbital sander. I was just putting the leg in place, and then I pull it out and look for the rub mark, and then I would just sand that down and just continue to do that until I got them to fit. Now, I put those 1/8" pieces from yesterday, I put those on the inside of the leg because what I had saw earlier is if I would have put those 1/8" pieces on the outside of the leg, it would have kicked those legs in, and this would have left quite a bit of a gap here, and I would have had to have worked that out. Plus, we want to maintain the distance. We want to make sure our distance is correct and the same. So I'm thinking putting those on the inside of the leg should bump those legs out. And so that's why I did that. So next up, the challenging part is the gap here that we have. We basically have on the front part of this leg about a ½ inch to nothing. So we want to fill that in. And what I'm thinking about doing is gluing just a square piece on and then going over to my bandsaw and tilting the table. And we'll see if we can't do it that way. I'll have to kind of just go over and do a dry run and see if the table, if that will work depending on the leg angle and everything. I don't know. I'm one of those that I kind of have to go over and do a dry run first. And that's what I'm going to do now. But let's go ahead and let's cut a couple of pieces here and put them on and see if that's going to work. If not, then what I'll just end up doing is cutting those at the angle and putting them on and then fitting them in. So, but let's see if this works first. Well, that looks like that's going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and glue a couple of pieces on here, and then we can set it aside to dry, you know, give it a few hours, and then we should be able to go over to the bandsaw and then cut the angle that we need. Well, I was trying to figure out how I could clamp these couple of pieces there. I thought maybe a couple of wood clamps, you know, sort of position, but that wasn't working out. You know, what I really need are some heavy rubber bands. That would work perfect for this, but I don't have any, and that may be one thing I need to order in here and have on hand at the shop, are some rubber bands. So, oh well. Now I'm wondering, should I put a piece in here? I'm thinking I should. Let's go ahead and do that. So just looking at this, this looks pretty good. I think it'll be okay just to go ahead and set this aside. That I don't think it's worth trying to mess around and trying to put a clamp on it. I mean, I could cut a piece of wood to fit the shape of this leg, square it off and get some clamps on it, but you know, when we're going to be cutting the angle, we're going to be going from, you know, from here to nothing. It's just going to be a small piece. I think just setting this aside will be plenty for a few hours, and then we'll come back and revisit that and see what we can do. Let's do the other leg now. Okay, that looks good. Let's just set this one aside to dry. We'll give those a few hours. That glue should set. Now let's go ahead and take a look at these front legs. So this leg, this front leg here, fits in really nice. We have a little bit of a gap at the front and the back. And what I'm thinking now is I'm just going to cut some wedges after the leg is dry, maybe tomorrow, and we'll just put some wedges in, or later this evening, we'll put some wedges in here, and that should fix that. But there's enough, this leg goes in tight enough that we don't need to worry about doing it like we did here on the back and cutting pieces and cutting them. So I think a couple of wedges there is going to work fine. Now, the muscle block just fell off And to be honest with you, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take what's left of the muscle blocks on the inside and maybe on the outside. I'm going to take those off anyways. There's one on the rear leg that's about to fall off. So I think what I'm going to do after we get all the legs fitted is I'll go back in and cut some thin pieces, make new muscle blocks. Then when we go to fix and kind of carve everything to blend everything in, we can kind of blend those in a little bit better, and that will correct that. So that's what I'm thinking right now. Let's see how the other leg fits. Well, that leg went in really good. So these front legs are going to glue back together really well. We have a little bit of a gap on the inside here. Again, I think I can correct that with a shim and glue it in place. And as you can see on this side, we're missing the muscle block anyway. So like I said, I think I'm going to go ahead and remove those muscle blocks on the front and rear legs anyways, and we'll put those back on and recarve those. And that should fix that. So before I glue these down tight though, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to wait until the glue's set on these rear legs, and then we can go ahead and get those shaped, get those cut, get them fitted, make sure everything looks right. You know, we can kind of take a measurement on the front and the back and make sure everything looks good, because boy, I'd sure hate to glue these down and then find out, you know, we needed to make an adjustment. So let's just hold off on that right now. We'll come back in a few hours and we'll work on those rear legs, get those to fit, and then we can step back and take a look at it. Well, it's been long enough. This glue should be set. So let's go over to the bandsaw and let's tilt the table and let's just see if we can't kind of shape these little blocks, make them into wedges. There we go. Well, that first pass, I went just a bit short, so I made another pass at it, and that looks good. I think a little bit of glue, once we glue everything in, we'll be able to, you know, sort of salvage that. You'll never know. The other side looks really good. So I'm just going to take my sander, I think, and just see if I can't just sand this centerpiece down, and then let's just see if it'll fit. Well, after about an hour of sanding and filing, I think I've got it looking pretty good. So we've got just a little bit, I took just a little bit too much off this back here, but towards the front it's fine. So we'll be able to fix that, but there's enough there to work with. But the leg is nice and solid. It looks good in the front, but like I said, this muscle block right here, let me see if we can get it on the camera up here. This muscle block right here, it's about to come off anyways. There's not much there. So if I go ahead and peel that off and add a new thin piece on there, then I can tighten up this gap right here. A little wedge right there again, not a big deal. But for the most part, that looks really good. Once we clamp that, we should be able to draw that in even tighter. So good. Let's do the second leg. I'll tell you what really messed me up, and I think I'm going to do it before I even start. This centerpiece, I didn't need it, so I'm just going to take my chisel and see if I can pop that back out, and then we can go ahead and cut these over on the bandsaw. That centerpiece, I thought that was a good idea, but now that really kind of messed me up. Don't need it. That looks good. I have just a little bit of a gap here in the front, but again, I think I can just wiggle in a little bit of a shim when I glue these down tight, and that'll fix that. But the only thing I think I am going to do, this tenon right here is about 3/8 of an inch short. So I think I'm just going to glue on about 3/8 of an inch, make that tenon just a little bit wider so that we can fill in that gap. And then what I think I'm going to do tomorrow is, once these legs are dry, then we'll go in and we'll carve this away. And then what I'm thinking is maybe taking a bit of a wedge, a long wedge. And I know this is going to be kind of hard, I'm explaining it, but I'm kind of working this out in my head too. But I think I'll glue something on along here, which will fix that gap. I have a little bit of a piece of tear out right here, which I thought about fixing, but again, I don't think it's worth messing with. I can just cut a real small, like triangle, a long triangle, fit that in, and then that will give it a nice contour, and that'll also provide just, a little bit of strength, but mostly it'll be cosmetic and cover all of that up. So let's go ahead and add about 3/8 of an inch to this tenon. Now let's just give that a little time to dry, and then we'll come back in, and then we're just going to measure everything one more time. I do have the hoof rails here, so I may get those and put those across here and just kind of take a quick look. And then I think we'll be ready to glue the legs down permanently. Okay, it's been a few hours, so I think we're ready to put the other leg in. And what I'm going to do here, I brought the hoof rails over. The client was good enough to send me the hoof rails, and that's a huge help. They didn't send the stand because they said they're going to bring it when they come to pick up. So that's not going to be too big of an issue. But having the hoof rails here is going to be a big help, because what I want to do is when we put these legs on, before we glue them down tight, I want to take a look and see if our holes, the mounting holes, not necessarily where the swing arms are going to go, not these holes, but up here where the hooves are going to mount. I want to see if we're going to line back up again. So that'll be a really good indicator if everything is going back the way it should. So let's take the clamp off. I'm going to trim this tenon here. Give it a quick sand. Let's see how we did. And we just need to trim a little bit off of that. So I'll do that over at the bandsaw. Yeah, that looks good there. It's tight. Now let's see if we can figure out which one is the left and the right. Let's see if we can get a screw. Put a few things away, make a little room here. That seems to fit pretty good. Let's see, do we have that on right? No. So I'm just looking here at where the caps of the bowler hats would go. So once again, I've been standing here looking over everything, and we have a new dilemma that I see. So right here, get my pencil this back leg where I just cut a little bit off this tenon. I took about 1/4 of an inch off. It's pushing this leg back to me too far, because now it's opened up about 1/2 inch we're away from where it was originally carved. My big dilemma is I do not want to alter this horse, obviously, too much, and that to me is way too much. I mean, this leg needs to come forward. That's why originally I was adding on to those tenons, because I'm trying to line everything back up as best I can. Now, this leg right here, and I'll try to bring the camera in and I can show you this a little bit better, but I was trying to line up the leg here where it originally went, and back here I'm actually pushed a little bit more forward. If I have to go in and do a little bit of carving and tweaking, I would much rather come in line and carve, if I have to, just a little bit on the rear end than up here on the front. That's just my opinion. So I absolutely cannot leave it like that, just to line up these holes up here in the hoof rails. So the other thing too that I discovered is I know I'm correct with the orientation of the hoof rails, because on this particular rail and leg, they've drilled in twice. So I've got 2 holes here showing, and there's 2 holes right here. So I do know that is the correct orientation. So we know where this hoof rail is meant to go. So it's not that we're reversed anywhere. So what I'm now thinking is I'm going to shift this leg back forward, and I'm just going to, and I don't see any other way to go about this, but I'm just going to plug these holes, and we'll re-drill those once we get the horse, once we get everything, you know, carved and basically, you know, primed or something. We'll go back in and we'll just re-drill those. I hate to do that, but I just don't see any other alternative. And I believe we're only going to be off a little bit. So, you know, the other part about this is, you know, are these holes going to show? And I don't think they are, because we're not moving it too much. So I think even though we're going to plug them, I think the hooves themselves, once they're reseated back on the notch and everything, I think the hooves themselves are going to cover up the old hole. So I think we're only going to be shifting it maybe 1/4 of an inch in either direction. That's what I'm thinking right now. But that to me, if it were me, in my opinion, is I would much rather drill the hoof rails than to try to, you know, alter and carve these legs and everything, you know, into the body. And I think that's just doing too much damage at that point. And I absolutely don't want to do that. So I think at this point, you know, originally what I was thinking is we would just put the hoof rails in place. You know, we glue everything and then tweak it, put the hoof rails in place, and then that way we know once the glue sets, then the hoof rails would line back up again. But there's just no way we're going to be able to do that. Like I said, with having 1/2 inch back here, shifting these legs, and that's just not going to work. So let's just go ahead, and I'm going to pull these back legs right now. And I think what I want to do before we start gluing everything in place permanently is I'm just going to take my orbital sander and just sand these little wedges and go ahead and get these all flush, get everything ready to go. And then it's just a matter of let's just glue it all down tight. And once that's done, then we can go in and then we can kind of look at some other things. I don't want to jump the gun and say we'll go back in and maybe we'll put the hoof rails back up once everything's dry and tight tomorrow. We'll throw the hoof rails up just for fun and see how far off the holes are going to be. I'm going to say they're not going to be off much, but we'll look at that tomorrow. But let's go ahead. We'll set these aside and we'll get ready and get everything ready to go. And let's get these legs glued down nice and tight. Okay, this is it. The moment we've all been waiting for. Gluing these legs down tight. That looks good. So, like I said earlier, I'm not going to worry about the hoof rails. We're just going to go ahead and glue these down tight. I have my pinch dogs here ready to go. So that's what we're going to use to secure these legs and get them clamped down. Now, while I was letting that tenon, that little piece I put on, while I was letting that dry, I was upstairs, I was editing this video, and I was going back and watching my video and watching what I was doing. You know, like I said, I don't know any other way than to re-drill the hoof rails just where they mount. You know, if you can think of something, if you saw something that I didn't, I'd love to hear from you. You know, put it in the comments. And I don't know of any other way other than you know, just re-drilling those. And I don't think that's going to be a real issue at all. So, but we're about to find out. So let's go ahead, get some glue on this and start getting these clamped. Now I found a piece of scrap here. I think it's going to work perfect for a shim right here where I've got a bit of a gap. This area right here. Well, there we are. Our legs are back on. I just had to flip it over just to see if it was going to sit level, and it's off probably about a half an inch or so. And I have been looking around it, and I don't see anywhere where I can adjust the legs and kind of reposition it, because all of the legs went back in, and they, as far as I can tell, they're back where they were originally. The back legs all line up nice. A little bit of carving back here, like I said, which I was sort of expecting, you know, that I'll have to shape. But it's like I said earlier, I'd rather shape back in here than up underneath, you know, the front of the leg. So everything is back the way it was. So I don't see anywhere where I can adjust, and nor do I want to. So I think we're good. We're just going to let this sit now overnight, and we'll just let it, you know, do its thing. We'll let it dry, and we'll come back tomorrow. We'll pull our pinch dogs, and like I said, I think, well, I just can't resist. We're going to have to put the hoof rails back up and just take a look and see how close we are. I don't think it's going to be that big a deal, but we'll check that tomorrow. So let's just let this sit tonight. I knew this was going to be a fight. I just knew it. These legs were going to be a problem. As soon as I saw this horse, when it first came to the shop, you know, last fall or whenever she sent it, it's been here a little while, I just knew, you know, the two problem areas, I saw that those center pieces were missing. I knew that was going to be a bit of a problem, but I just knew, especially these rear legs, I knew that was going to be a fight. I mean, I have been all day putting just 4 legs back on this horse, but you know, I want to get it right. I want to get it correct. We want to put it back so that it is as strong as we can possibly make it. And I think we've done a really good job. And like I said, I think a little bit of shaping back here, that's not going to be a problem, and that's not going to hurt anything really. So yeah, like I said though, if you can think of another way, I know it's hard to tell from the camera and, you know, the angles and everything else, but if, you know, what would you have done in this situation? Would you drill the holes? Would you sort of mess with the legs at all? That's, like I said, my opinion is I'd rather mess with the hoof rails and plug those and re-drill those. So, but I'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on you know, what you would have done. And as far, I'd like to hear your thoughts as far as the entire restoration, how this is all going. So, but anyways, that's enough of me talking. So we'll see y'all tomorrow. Well, good morning. Welcome back to the shop. We have our little horse here with its legs on. Everything is really nice and tight and secure. There is absolutely no movement anywhere. So let's go ahead, let's pull these pinch dogs, and then I want to wrap this episode up. I do want to put the hoof rails on. I'm just really curious to see how far off we are, and you know what we're going to have to do to realign those hoof rails when when we get to that point. But overall, I'm really pleased with how everything looks. Now, here's another example of, this is what I was talking about yesterday, was redoing these, gluing on new muscle blocks right here that this one had broke when I put the pinch dog in, but they're so thin and brittle and they're loose anyways that I don't see any reason why we just can't take all 4 off and just add on some new material. You know, I've got poplar pieces laying here that we can cut out some small areas, and just when we go in and start carving and fine tuning everything, then we can just do those muscle blocks real quick too. So let's just go ahead and let's get our hoof rails, put these aside, and let's just take a look and see. Well, this one goes here. And we'll look here at this one. So what I'm really looking for is if we see the old hole kind of show anywhere, if we kind of line them up. Because ultimately what I want to do is fill these holes and then re-drill them. And we just don't want to see the old hole. In here, I don't think it'll be a problem either. But like I said, we'll see what we can do when we get to that point. So that goes about there. So you're not going to see them at all. I'll see if I can put it on the side here. So like I said, what I'm looking for is to see if the old hole is going to get covered completely, and it is. So I don't think that's going to be an issue at all. So good. I think we made the right call by not really messing too much with these legs and trying to reposition them. I think we're better off, like I said, re-drilling the hoof rails and working that way. But overall, we're looking good. We'll do a little wedge here, and I'll work on that. And the same thing here, just a real small wedge. And then we'll make new muscle blocks. We'll fix that area. Just small little things to do, but all in all, this little horse is really starting to take shape. I'm really happy with everything. Good. Well, like I said, I want to wrap this video up. I was up editing yesterday or last night, and this video actually was starting to run about 2 hours long, so I've got a little bit of work ahead of me, so I do want to shorten this video up. But once again, I really appreciate you all tuning in, and again, let me know what you all think of our little G&L lines restoration and how it's going. Love to hear your thoughts out there. If you're interested in getting into something like this, getting into making these rocking horses, or getting into woodworking in general, or wood carving, you know, you're welcome to reach out to me. My email address will be in the description down below. All of the information that you might need to get started is in the description underneath each of my videos. So I put a wealth of information down there. Also, reach out to my friends at the Rocking Horse Shop in England. That's where you get the plans. That's where you can get the saddle kits, the hair, you know, glass eyes. They have everything, and they're also a wonderful group of people, and they have a wealth of knowledge there too. So you want to check them out. That is the Rocking Horse Shop in England. Well, as always, we will see you back here at the shop next episode. And as always, too, happy carving, and we'll see you again. Take care.